The drums of war are once again echoing across the Middle East. As American military preparations intensify and Tehran responds with defiant warnings, the world finds itself standing at the edge of a conflict that could redraw regional and global lines of power. Yet in the middle of this rising tension, an unexpected opening has appeared, a narrow corridor of diplomacy, a fragile chance for de-escalation. According to multiple international media reports, Washington and Tehran are preparing to sit at the same table this Friday. What began as a planned meeting in Istanbul has now shifted to Oman, a country long known for its quiet diplomacy and back-channel negotiations. Initially, reports suggested that the White House rejected Iran's demand for a bilateral Oman-based format, but under pressure from Arab leaders, the U.S. administration has now agreed to talks in Muscat. This single decision has already altered the trajectory of the crisis. But make no mistake, this is not a peace deal in the making. This is a test of leverage, red lines, and political survival. To understand how we arrived at this moment, we must step back. The roots of the current standoff do not lie in the past few weeks, or even the past few years. They stretch back more than 2 decades, to the early 2000s, when Iran's nuclear ambitions first became a central concern for Washington and its allies. Iran has consistently argued that its nuclear program is peaceful, aimed at energy generation and medical research. The United States, supported by Israel and several European powers, has long suspected otherwise. The result has been a cycle: sanctions, negotiations, temporary agreements, withdrawals, and renewed pressure. The 2015 Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, commonly known as the Iran nuclear deal, was supposed to break this cycle. Under that agreement, Iran sharply limited uranium enrichment in exchange for sanctions relief. But when the United States withdrew from the deal in 2018, the balance collapsed. Tehran gradually resumed enrichment. Washington reinstated sanctions, and trust evaporated. What we are witnessing today is not a new crisis. It is the delayed explosion of an old one. Fast forward to the present. American military assets have been repositioned across the region. Aircraft carriers in the Persian Gulf, missile defense systems on high alert, intelligence surveillance intensified. These are not symbolic gestures. They are signals designed to deter, but also to prepare. Iran, in response, has issued its own warnings. Senior officials have declared that any attack on Iranian soil will be met with retaliation, not only against U.S. forces, but against American interests across the region. From the Strait of Hormuz to Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen, Iran's network of regional allies and proxy groups stands as both shield and sword. This is why the stakes are so high. A single miscalculation could ignite multiple fronts simultaneously. Against this backdrop, the agenda dispute has emerged as the central fault line of the upcoming talks. Tehran has been explicit. Iran will discuss only 2 issues: its nuclear program and the economic sanctions that have crippled its economy. Nothing more. No missiles, no regional influence, no internal politics. From Iran's perspective, this position is logical. Ballistic missiles are seen as a core element of national defense, especially given the country's history of invasion and isolation. Regional alliances are framed as strategic depth, and human rights, Tehran argues, are an internal matter, not a bargaining chip. Washington sees it very differently. On Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio made the American position unmistakably clear. Any meaningful agreement, he said, must address Iran's ballistic missile program, its support for regional armed groups, and the state of human rights inside the country. Without these elements, the United States argues, any nuclear deal would be incomplete and ultimately ineffective. This is not just a policy disagreement. It is a clash of worldviews. The gap between these positions explains why diplomacy has been so elusive. Each side believes it holds the moral and strategic high ground. Each side fears that compromise will be interpreted as weakness by domestic audiences, by rivals, and by allies. Yet even as Washington and Tehran trade hardened statements, regional powers have stepped in. Qatar, Turkey, and Egypt have jointly presented a draft proposal aimed at breaking the deadlock. According to sources familiar with the plan, Iran would agree to refrain from using ballistic missiles preemptively. Uranium enrichment would be fully suspended for 3 years. Existing enriched uranium stockpiles would be transferred to a third country under international supervision. In return, the proposal offers something Tehran has long sought: a non-aggression pact. The United States and Iran would formally commit not to attack one another. On paper, this is a dramatic shift. In reality, it is a political minefield. Neither Tehran nor Washington has formally endorsed the proposal, and that silence speaks volumes. For Iran, accepting such terms risks domestic backlash. Hardline factions could frame the agreement as surrender. For the United States, offering a non-aggression pact without broader concessions could be criticized as legitimizing Iranian regional behavior. Yet the very existence of the proposal highlights a crucial fact. Regional actors are desperate to prevent war. A U.S. Iran conflict would not be contained. It would disrupt energy markets, destabilize fragile governments, and send shockwaves through the global economy. Consider the numbers. Roughly 20% of the world's oil passes through the Strait of Hormuz. Even a temporary disruption could drive prices sharply upward. Inflation, already a global concern, would intensify. Emerging economies would be hit hardest. This is why Oman matters, why these talks matter, why the world is watching. The first phase of this story, then, is about escalation narrowly avoided, but not resolved. Military pressure remains. Diplomatic channels are fragile. Trust is minimal. What exists is not peace, but pause. And pauses in geopolitics are dangerous. They can lead to breakthroughs or to explosions. The next phase begins where the first leaves off, with unanswered questions. What happens if the talks fail? What happens if they succeed, partially, imperfectly, temporarily? And who truly benefits from each outcome? To answer that, we must widen the lens. A limited agreement focused solely on nuclear issues could buy time. It could freeze enrichment, reduce immediate risk, and stabilize markets. But it would leave missiles untouched, regional proxy dynamics unchanged, human rights concerns unaddressed. A broader agreement could reshape the regional balance, but at a political cost few leaders are eager to pay. And then there is the third scenario, collapse. If talks break down, the logic of deterrence may give way to the logic of force. A U.S. strike aimed at delaying Iran's nuclear progress could trigger asymmetric retaliation, cyber attacks, maritime disruption, proxy assaults. History shows that limited wars rarely remain limited. In this moment, every actor is calculating. Washington weighs credibility against restraint. Tehran balances resistance against economic survival. Regional powers seek stability without choosing sides. Global markets brace for volatility. This is not diplomacy driven by trust. It is diplomacy driven by fear of what comes next. And that brings us to the heart of the matter. This crisis is not only about Iran and the United States. It is about the rules of the international system itself. Can major powers still resolve disputes through negotiation, or has the world entered an era where coercion replaces compromise? The talks in Oman will not answer all these questions, but they may determine whether the Middle East steps back from the brink or takes one step closer to the edge. History once again is holding its breath.